Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to sort of get off politics maybe just a little bit and look at the demise of the Western, when I say Western, I'm really talking about sort of Britain, Australia, United States, Canada, that sort of thing, the demise of motor vehicle production and how, went through some pretty difficult times. General Motors going into bankruptcy, having to be bailed out by taxpayer money. Chrysler struggling along. Ford going through a bad patch. These sorts of things. Now, by comparison, the Japanese, not that they haven't had their problems, they have, but the Japanese auto industry has done, on a relative basis, very well. The Korean auto industry is doing very well. The Chinese ones coming along. India is running around buying up Western brand name marks such as Jaguar and that sort of thing. But the indigenous production of motor vehicles, it's actually stopped in Australia. There are no locally manufactured vehicles anymore. Britain, it's got some sort of minor little pockets of motor vehicle production, and the United States has been seriously penetrated by overseas manufacturers and really struggles to fight back in the categories, the smaller car categories. Sure, the SUVs and that sort of thing, but the SUVs particularly are coming under attack from the people that want to get rid of motor vehicles, and they point to the SUVs. So there, you see, they're the things. They're creating all these emissions that we have to get rid of, and all these SUV owners are the ones that they're the problem, and that sort of thing. But coming back to it, I managed to get hold of a couple of fairly detailed reports that were commissioned by independent academics some years ago for some of them, and they were having a look at the demise of and I'm looking particularly here at some examples in Britain and Australia and one in the United States, but the demise of the local manufacturing. Now, it's hard to imagine so many mistakes and obvious mistakes and errors were made, but before I go into that, I was tapped quite some years ago now to help an IT company, very innovative one in many ways, turn around because they were in big trouble. They were just hemorrhaging money, and they didn't seem to know what to do. And I was a little surprised. And at that stage, I wouldn't have thought I was senior enough to be tapped for that sort of job. But anyway, so I came in and was really staggered at the sloppiness, the lack of proper controls, the lack of prudential standards. They didn't have proper profit and loss, and just wasn't there. The structure of the management wasn't there. People were running right all over the place. Expense accounts were just going through the roof, and there didn't appear to be the basic managerial controls that you'd think would be 101 management. But it ended up now for a variety of reasons. A lot of it personalities, and the president was a sort of a futuristic technological genius, and he was a genius, but he'd be off with the fairies thinking about what technology would look like in 10 years time, and sort of putting something together now, and he always wanted to have the latest prototype. So he really fucked himself up there, and given he pretty much everyone at the middle level had previously reported into him, he had this outsized influence, if you like, over what was happening. But they were burning $1.5 million a month, and yet the sales were quite brisk and so on. But that's how bad it was. But just by instituting basic 101 controls, we were able to really turn it around and bring it back into profit, which happened in less than 12 months. Now, coming back to the automobile industry, going through these reports, and some of it's based on interviews with the senior management team, and this is after the company's gone bankrupt, so they've got the benefit of hindsight here, which is it's easy to be wise after the event. And if they were so wise and knowing, why didn't they act beforehand? And one suspects that they really didn't know, or didn't fully appreciate, or just didn't see the iceberg coming. But they were too busy caught up in petty internal politics, that sort of thing. But some things really stood out, and there's one organisation, a car company, that was making millions of cars. They were doing really well. They had this wide dealer network. They were producing some of the cars were really popular. They were, they had over a million employees on the production line. That's how well these guys were doing. This is some years ago, and yet they were starting to come under various cost pressures from imports, and but instead of saying, well, we need to address this, and we need to be more efficient on our production line, more efficient in our production generally, more efficient in our control of inventory, quality control, all these sorts of things, which is a direction the Japanese were going in, Germans too. They started having life and death struggles with the trade unions, and think, if only we can get those bums to accept lower wages, then we'll be good to go. Now, the wages were already lower than what the Germans were paying their workers, and yet their automobile industry was going ahead in leaps and bounds. So clearly, it just wasn't a case of worker wages, or certainly not in isolation anyway. Worker efficiency, well, there was something there, but they went after wages and created such bad feeling with the unions that there was really almost nowhere out. That there was the unions and the workers on the shop floor viewed the management as just a bunch of evil so-and-sos who were trying to screw them, and the management viewed the workers as just an intractable bunch of hoi polloi who weren't worth pissing on, and so the antagonism was so great that it was almost impossible to achieve some sort of consensus. The Germans, by comparison, were very good at producing consensus, and everybody, the workers, realised if the company does well, then we're all going to keep our jobs, and then there'll be more jobs, and we'll get bonuses, and this sort of thing, and simply the prestige of working for a company that is doing well, that has a great product that everyone appreciates and respects and admires. But this wasn't something that the management in Britain, anyway, on this particular company, were doing very well at all. Now, the other thing was that a lot of the management of the German company were people who worked their way up through the ranks and who were either knowledgeable in the industry or prepared to defer to people who were knowledgeable. Now, there's a certain art to being a chairman, even though you may not be an expert in something yourself, to assemble the skills around the table and the knowledge, and then you simply sort of, as a chairperson, you make sure that the better ideas percolate to the top, and the more sensible and practical ideas percolate to the top, and they're the ones that are put into practice. And so the German management they weren't perfect, but they were much better at that chairmanship. Now, the British company, by comparison, what I want to talk about here, particularly where the government gets involved. Now, the company started to run into trouble due to imports. So instead of doing something about meeting the challenge of imports, they simply reduced the price of their product, which meant they were selling it really barely above break even. They were maybe 1% profit, if that, and that's out of the factory. And then the dealer network got to make their money, and they were hoping that the money, that the profit, they could bring the profit back into the system through things like servicing and maintenance and spare parts and these sorts of things, and through financing, which is a path that all the companies, with General Motors, all those companies went down. So they hoped they could make up the profit in the entire sort of food chain, if you like, through those things, rather than through just efficiently and effectively producing cars. And they didn't think about that. Now, other things that struck me were they brought in people to design a new hot-looking, slick-looking car, and that's fine, that's okay. But instead of using the designers they had, they brought in outside designers, and then had them competing with the internal designers, and they're paying these outside designers, some who are big names, and they want big bucks for doing the design. So they're throwing a lot of money at that. They're pissing off and alienating their own design team. So So, and while the car design is running concurrently, and there are a number of designs, but I'm thinking one in particular here. There was the engineering team was having to design a new engine. Now it was either an old engine they had to kind of remodel to be more update, have a greater displacement, or throw twin carbs on it, or just add better breathing or something like that. But they were designing the engines and various car components, suspension, that sort of thing, without reference to the design of the car. So they didn't know if the engine they were designing or in the process of coming to would fit it. So they would produce what they thought, or create what they thought was the ultimate engine, only to find it didn't fit in that design of car. So instead of getting the two sides to talk to each other and organise something, which wouldn't have been difficult, the government was giving money to them by now, and the government said, well, now we're giving you money, we want our people to be in there. We want socialites, who are cocktail party sort of sluts to come in. We want them because we like them. We trust them, and they're great to have a cigar with in the gentleman's club. And we're going to put them in charge. They're going to be the new CEO or the new president. But these people didn't know diddly squat about cars and didn't give a shit. They were there for the prestige, for a very handsome salary, and really they took the classic sort of almost aristocratic point of view that if we can just get those damn workers to take less money, we'll all be good to go. So they weren't being good chairmen and making sure that the engineers designing the engine and various components were working with the car designers. They wouldn't even make a decision on which car design they wanted until well down the track. And then the engineers had to scramble to try and retrofit the engine or work something else out, often having to redesign the engine from various other components from the ground up. So the duplication of effort and so on, the double handling was just absolutely out of control. So it was chaotic. The scene was chaotic, and again, it wouldn't have taken, even a half decent middle manager would have spotted that this was a problem and headed it off at the pass. But somehow the senior management just missed it all. Some of it was personalities. There's a guy who's maybe designed a successful car design before, and he's got like a godlike status, and nobody wants to question sort of his ultimate wisdom. Or the same maybe say with an engineer that's got a reputation for designing a hot shit engine. There can be these sorts of things going on. But again, a chairman would jump in here and say, okay, we have to make this project for this car work. And other things I noticed too, that when the company was sold, they had no profit and loss. They had no structure for working out which cars, in terms of cost of production, cost of getting out to the dealer network, were they selling, how many were coming back to be repaired, what was the cost of that repair, and so on. Then they had none of these figures. There appeared to be no even basic management controls in there. So it's hard. You got to wonder why it even lasted as long as it did, let alone it went on for years as it did before it went into bankruptcy and had to be sold. Now there are other tunes. There was another model of car where again foolish rookie errors have been made all over the place. The engine of the car, or the panels of the car, have been made bigger to accommodate a larger engine. But the company that makes the panels only has tooling to make small panels, not big panels. But no one even thinks to ask this or to deal with it, or no one says anything, or if it is said, no one cares. It's someone else's problem, and it's sort of the hot potato gets passed around. So when production for the car begins, there's no capacity to make the panels for that car, and everyone's shocked. And so there's this last minute mad scramble where they throw money in all directions to try and get a production facility up that can handle the panels. It's done poorly and cheaply. The panels aren't well made. They buckle when they're put together. So in the end, that these cars, this particular car, had so many defects at so many levels, whether it be the windscreen, whether it be latches for the hood or the bonnet, or all these sorts of things, door latches, that type of thing. So they actually created another company with engineers to take these cars as they came off the production line and spend and there was like over 60 quite well qualified engineers would work on these cars to make them ready to go for sale. So you can imagine the cost and the expense. The expense was through the roof, and still they couldn't produce saleable cars. So this was an almost an unbelievable oversight by management. It's just hard to comprehend that this was missed. Now maybe they were delegating it to more junior managers who and they missed it, but a lot of as you see through this, a lot of the more competent upper middle managers are viewed as troublemakers because they say, we got problems here, we need to fix this, we need to address that. And instead of seeing them as people that are bringing real practical, real world problems to the attention, they are viewed in those sort of cultures as being troublemakers and not part of the team and not team players. And a lot of these people get fired or demoted or pushed out to some bullshit job in the middle of nowhere, and then they get that feedback. Necessary feedback is lost. So it was absolutely amazing to look at the things. But the thing was, as soon as the government buys in, maybe for legitimate reasons at the outset, they do a bailout. As soon as they come in, they then want to say, okay, now we're giving you taxpayer money. We want jobs for our buddies. I've got mistresses. I've got buddies you have to hire as very expensive consultants. I want board of director members, well paid, and I want the CEO's job. The government, could be the prime minister or president or somebody like that, or maybe the secretary for industry or something is wanting all these things. So instead of putting in, we're putting in taxpayer money, let's really put in competent management. Instead of doing that, they go down the patronage path of simply putting their buddies and friends in there. That further weakens the company, so then they need more money, more taxpayer money, so the government then wants to put more of their buddies in there, gravy trainers, hangers-on, passengers, that sort of thing, which weakens the company even further and so on. So once the downward spiral begins, it's difficult to stop it. It can be arrested and turned around, but it takes quite vigorous action. Now, from my own experience on a much, much smaller scale, by the way, my own experience is there's a lot of people who have a vested interest in things staying as chaotic as they are. Some of them are doing very nicely, thank you, out of it, and they'd rather destroy the company, keep their benefits, for as long as it lasts. They'd rather ride it into the ground than do something to turn it around. So I found that it was an intense struggle with the vested interests, if you will, to try and turn it around, and they weren't prepared to think of the common good, or let's make the company successful, or let's do something to make this company a real success. They didn't give a shit. They were concerned only with the benefits they could extract out of it, and if it went broke tomorrow, that was fine. They didn't care as long as they were getting their benefits right up to the last minute. And this was clearly the case. I believe this was clearly the case with some of these motor vehicle companies. There were executives who were paying themselves multi-gazillion-dollar bonuses and salaries, even while the company was disappearing into the abyss. They were still doing it and didn't seem to give a shit. In fact, if anything, they were increasing their bonuses because they knew or figured the end might be coming pretty soon. So they wanted to stuff as much money in their pockets as they could before the end came. But none of them seem to want to actually deal with the problem. Let's turn this around. So just going over it's piss poor management. Piss poor management is the issue here, and it's not workers being overpaid, because again, the British workers, or Australian workers for that matter, they're being paid less than German workers were. Also had fewer holidays, fewer vacations, and also they were paid less than at that stage, the Japanese workers were being paid. The Japanese auto industry was very successful, as indeed was the German auto industry. So these, and if you look at, say, Korean workers now, car industry workers, they're paid a comparable wage to any first world country, and their auto industry, including trucks and other things, is doing very well also. So the quality of management is what did it. There are people, socialites, just looking for prestige, prestigious jobs, and so they can be interviewed on the business talk circuit and sound like they're all godlike and knowledgeable and everything. Well, really, the company's sort of all collapsing around them. But instead of dealing with the issues, they simply want that prestige. Now, similarly, given they're socialites, they don't really know what to do. And given other people on the board and at the executive management level are also from the same class of socialites as they are, nobody really wants to upset or offend anybody. They're all very polite. They're all thinking about cocktail parties and weekends at the country club and these sorts of things, and so they tend not to really want to deal with the hard, because to deal with the hard issues mean people have got to be carpeted, people have got to be fired, people have got to be told, look, you're not up to it, Jack, and these sorts of things. And nobody really wants to do that. And that's they'll do that to the the hoi polloi, but not to their own social peers. And this is part of the problem. As soon as you get away from quality management and you go into the socialite patronage machine, then that's an inevitable consequence, as we've seen so many times in the auto industry. You've been with Tastus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.